Hello sim racing fanatics, welcome back to the Game of Muscle YouTube channel. The wait is over and welcome to our first impressions of Assetto Corsa Competizione early access. This is very early. This is Egyptian society. It's not even Egyptian, this is Aztec throwing people off temples in sim rigs after ripping their hearts out. That's exactly what happened. It's early, so keep that in mind. Everything I'm saying here, this is early access. That means the game is being developed. Stuff's going to change. It's early, so let's start with that and let's keep that in mind. So, before we get into the details, what is Assetto Corsa Competizione? For those of you that don't know, well, it's the official Blancpain GT Series game. Nobody knows what Blancpain means. Clear glass. They make watches. Good sponsorship there of a race series. Blancpain GT Series. This is the official game. I'm confused. But, you know, that's motorsport. It's not meant to be easy to understand. It's meant to be just a crazy business with logos all over the place. Logos on the cars, logos on the walls, logos tattooed on your eyelids, logos inserted into your brain or on computer chips, so all you can think of are logos. That's the future of motorsport. But that's basically what ACC is. For those of you in the know, ACC is basically Assetto Corsa 2. And if you go into the game folder, it actually says AC2 as the folder directory, so it's AC2. Unless Kunos are trolling, and well, let's face it, Kunos have more troll than Norway, so that's quite possible. But there you go, it's AC2, but the Blancpain official game, all the cars and all the tracks in the Blancpain GT series, it's got day, night, it's got rain, it's got clouds, it's got sunshine, and if you like your GT cars, because that's what you've been driving on service for the last 30 years, then you probably like this. There you go. That's the introduction of what it is for those that know nothing about it. I've probably just caused confusion. Their noses are bleeding and they regret coming to this channel. Their problem, not mine. For those of you already immersed in this, of course, the biggest feature that the AC fanboys are looking for is the ranking side of it and how that will come along. Unfortunately, in the early access, at this point in time, for this first month of the early access, there's no real ranking stuff. It's just a single player where you get one car, one track, Nürburgring GP specifically, and you can drive that car against AI in the different weather, different times of day, different lengths of racing, and you can sort of mess around with it and get a basic idea of what it feels like and what it looks like and how well it will run. With, of course, it presumably being optimised more in the future. It's all going to change its early access. That out of the way, what did Lord Sir Muscle of Entitlement think of this early access so far? What's our feedback? Well, let's begin with the force feedback. That's the first feedback, the force feedback. I have to say, it's I don't know how to put this, guys. My hype train has been derailed. I don't know what's going on here, but the force feedback doesn't have the detail that's found in Assetto Corsa. There's more going on. There's definitely more going on in some areas. It seems like they've got gyroscopic precession going on with the tyres, and some aspects of the force feedback might be more realistic or not, depending on how you perceive force feedback. But crucially, there's less information through the force feedback to actually drive the car from in terms of actually responding to the vehicle and the sort of rawness of the force feedback. In this early access version of the game, there seems to be a lot of dampening built into the force feedback, making everything feel rather sludgy and imprecise. And that's not just relative to Assetto Corsa, that's relative to iRacing, R-Factor 2 and Assetto Corsa. It just feels a bit dampened. It's like someone's set a dampening filter really high, or like an inertia filter has been set really high, and there's no way to turn that off at the moment. In the menu, all you can do is set the force feedback value. And of course, I've got an OSW with a SimuCube, and I can turn everything off and have it as raw from the game as possible. And even then, it still felt super dampened and sludgy. I thought I was just being crazy. I'm just hoping my computer's broken here. But I also tried this with the Thrustmaster T300, and I went into the same car in Assetto Corsa, and the same car in this, the Lamborghini, yeah, it just felt there's less information on the T300 than there is in Assetto Corsa, because the T300 is essentially being overwhelmed by the amount of innate dampening that's in the game. I even looked through the game files to see if there's anything I can edit to remove it, but no, I think everything's sort of packaged off, so you can't really access things. So, given that force feedback is my holy grail, I've fallen into a state of severe depression over this. If I ignore the sort of gloopy, dampened feel, and sort of focus on the positive force feedback, as I say, it does seem like there's some nice tyre flex information coming through. It's not actually that dissimilar to the Project Cars 2 mid-corner feel in some ways. More detailed than the Project Cars 2 mid-corner feel. The ABS effect when the ABS is kicking on, because you're slapping down the brake going into corners, that seems really nicely done, although that is essentially more of a vibration. But the actual tyre carcass vibration that you get when you're really ramping a car around a corner and the back wheels are shaking, or if you spin, curbing and stuff, that kind of stuff I think is better done in ACC than Assetto Corsa. Things seem a little bit more rounded in the force feedback, but at the same time it just lacks that immediacy that you get in iRacing, Assetto Corsa and R-Factor 2, which becomes really noticeable if you get in a situation where you start to lose the back of the car and you have to do a quick snap correction, because the force feedback seems to get in your way and it makes the cars just feel really sluggish. And at some points driving this, I feel like I'm driving a lorry or a tractor. Ultimately, as it is right now, I would just drive this essentially with the force feedback practically off. It just, I don't know. It feels like a broken R-Factor 2 force feedback. It's just, I don't know. Oh, Kudos, what have you done? I mean, because AC's force feedback is really good to me. Amazing. Just amazing. I know it's a bit overactive. AC force feedback is overactive, especially if you with the direct drive wheel. If you don't use the gyroscopic effect and you don't then use some filter settings, and some cars are ridiculously overactive with the force feedback. So I can understand making it more realistic in the sense that a real car is not that overactive. But it's a case, in my opinion, of having it so it's not overactive, but it still, feels really tight and immediate. Because at the end of the day, we're not in a bloody real car moving around. I need to get an idea of what the G-forces and the load of the car are like through the steering, or at least have that as an option. This just feels like Shrek's swamp. Right, after that headfirst dive off Tower Bridge into the River Thames and contracting hypothermia, let's talk about the handling. It's hard for me to tell specifically with the handling because the force feedback is so just how it is. But I do think the handling in this is probably more nuanced than Assetto Corsa, using that as a benchmark. In many ways, the handling in this, again, it kind of seems closer or more similar in some ways to R-Factor 2, if I was to draw a comparison between different games. But kind of like an R-Factor 2 mixed with Assetto Corsa. There's definitely more rear-end traction loss with this. Even if you've got traction control set on, the rear of the car is way more willing to get loose, especially at the start of a race when the tyres are cold. And the rear of the car is way more willing to rotate out from steering input than it was in Assetto Corsa. The cars in this are just generally much more loose, and the tyres are much more willing to sort of laterally slip around the track, which in some ways I think can make the driving more interesting in certain areas, more nuanced in certain areas. Like the mid-corner balance can be quite interesting, how you go into a corner, the speed you go into a corner and how much lateral slip you're willing to take going into a corner. But at the same time, I feel it lacks that really satisfying bite that you get in Assetto Corsa, which is probably largely due to the force feedback. I mean, the force feedback sort of goes hand in hand with the physics to give that end perception and the end feel of the game. So for me, it'll be really interesting to see if they do change the force feedback moves in the future, or give more options with the force feedback, how that then changes my perception of the handling. At its underbelly, though, I think it's pretty clear that there's much more variability in the tyres. There's much bigger range between when the tyres are good, going off, when they've got grip, when they haven't got grip, when they're kind of moderately got grip. The tyres definitely have, at a fundamental level, much more variability than probably any other simulator that I've played at this point in time. So that could be really interesting, especially when you combine them with these GT cars, because in AC these GT cars can get a little bit repetitive and a bit stale in some ways due to just how tame they are. By having them be much less tame and a lot harder to drive in ACC, or a lot more range to their basic fundamental handling, I can see how over time it makes it a more compelling experience, and people are going to be far less likely to get bored of the vehicles. Even in the dry, when you then add day, night, and then if they actually do decent rank structure multiplayer with this, and if that actually does work out, then that could be really, really compelling. Last thing with the handling, and separate to force feedback, because I tested this with the force feedback off. I've tested this with making sure that VSync was off. I've got the frame rate on the screen using fraps. I've run it windowed. Turn the graphics right down to 0, or whatever the lowest graphics settings are. Try the different AA settings, temporal AA, the FX AA, no AA, or turn the AAs down as low as you can go, and then just using super sampling by turning the resolution up. All of that, it's regardless of all that, it seems to me like there's a sort of 15 to 20 millisecond latency between what's going on in the game and the actual input. It just doesn't visually look or seem visually as responsive as Race Room, Assetto Corsa, iRacing, rFactor 2, Automobilista. There seems to be some sort of delay going on, and I can't put my finger on it, and I don't know. I hope it's just like an early access thing. I hope I'm just being mental. I don't know. It'd be interesting if you guys could say in the comments if this is something you sort of notice or perceive. Of course, now I've said that, I've probably just placeboed everyone into imagining that there's some sort of latency there. So now Kunos is going to get loads of messages about it, and they're going to have a breakdown, especially if there isn't actually latency there, and I've just invented it by drinking too much tea and having tea hallucinations. But there definitely seems to be this sort of lack of immediacy, is the best way I can describe it with this. That I've not found in the other simulators. Again, I hope it's just because this is early access, and maybe it's an Unreal Engine thing that needs to be ironed out. I don't know, but something just doesn't feel tight. And I'm not talking about force feedback, as I say. This is with force feedback off. This is just on the raw input side of things. But yeah, there you go. Early access. So let's move on to our next aspect of the game, and the graphics. Now, the graphics, oh my god, this is like the worst. I'm a total AC fanboy, for those of you that are new to this, if you've survived this far in the video, so maybe that's why this has just gone awry. The graphics, now, from the external views, the graphics look absolutely phenomenal. The trees, gorgeous, the grass, lush. The track textures, the curbing, the car details, the lighting, the sky, the art looks absolutely bloody amazing. From external views, top-down views, third-person views, fantastic. Probably one of the nicest looking driving simulators that's ever been made. Also, all the little track details, the cranes, the crowds, the bouncy castles, just unbelievable that it can run at a good frame rate. I mean, I am using a 1080 Ti, but still, looks amazing. When you get into the cockpit, though, and you drive from the cockpit view, the crucial details are really not that clear. So the road texture details become kind of blurred out and ambiguous. So the road kind of looks rather plain. Now, that's less of an issue if you're going to be running at, say, 150 super sampling, which requires a rather beastly computer. But if you're not doing that and you're using the FXAA, it just looks kind of murky. You get all these shimmering effects from the FXAA, which are really distracting. You get like light shimmering all over the place. The edges of things just look pretty atrocious, to be honest. And then you can use temporal AA, which does a really good job of removing a lot of the shimmering or the aliasing, but then you get this weird ghosting effect on your hands, like you're like a spooky race driver, which to me is really off-putting. Now, I'm sure you could just get used to that, but it makes it feel like you're driving on a plasma screen TV. So with the graphics settings that are available, bear in mind early access, and these are the kind of things that can get tweaked at a later date. There's no point tweaking them early on because, you know, they might be doing other bits and bobs, so why tweak these things now? But as it is right now, I personally have to say I'm just missing traditional AA. We need traditional AA. Now, obviously, it's to do with it if it's like a deferred renderer and, you know, all that technical gubbins. But as it is right now, I appreciate the grass and the trees, and the grass is the most important thing, but I went from between this and AC, and obviously AC's ended development and it's been modded and there's now shader mods and everything. You can't directly compare a game in development with a game that's finished. So look, I understand that. Got that in mind. Don't write a comment going, nah, it's in development. I know it's early access, but it makes me a little bit worried that in the final version of the game, you will have these shimmering effects going on all the time, and I'll feel like I'm having a stroke or some kind of migraine with my plasma screen TV ghosted steering wheel. You know, that's just the worry. I just look at this as it is now, and it's 4 or 5 months until the final game release, and that's not a long time, and there's a lot to do. In my mind, this is like a year and a year off. I mean, I know Kunos are bloody geniuses. The people that work there are insane. So, you know, maybe this is normal, but I just think, oh dear, that's not a lot of time for all these little niggly things, and then these some quite core fundamental things. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to be positive here. Early access. My fanboy mind is exploding. Let's talk a little bit about the AI whilst the brain comes out the nostrils. AI seem pretty much the same as the AI in Assetto Corsa. If you stop, they stop behind you. They do their little moves and stuff. They do some interesting things. You can get okay racing with the AI, but, you know, it's like AC AI. But maybe some mild improvements, but it's AC AI effectively. I personally, I'm not a big fan of AI racing anyway, so it's there. You can use it to get up to speed with things. You can have fun with it. It's going to depend on your skill level and what you're willing to put up with as to if you enjoy the AI. But yeah, basically, if you played Assetto Corsa AI, then this generally drives and feels very similar from the time I spent with this and the time I spent with Assetto Corsa. So there's not really much to say about the AI. A quick bash about the audio. You know, it sounds fine. I'd say it's a mild improvement over the sound that's in AC with the same car. I think the brake sound and some of the tyre sounds are more subtle, which is quite nice. You can gauge what the tyres are doing a bit better from the tyre sounds, which is good because you can't gauge what they're doing from the force feedback half the time. Whoop, gone back there. Don't do that. Get into trouble. But yeah, there's little bits of details with the sound that's in addition to what was found in AC. But the sound is not as exciting as the sound in Race Room, and not as exciting as the sound that I've experienced with some of the Fonseca modifications for AC. So it's fine. It's not a negative. It doesn't detract from it. It immerses you in the car. But from my time with it so far, the sound hasn't absolutely blown my nipples off. So you know, it's a sort of progression and continuation from the sound that was in Assetto Corsa. So I mean, really, I mean, it is early access. Keep in mind, again, early access. Hear ye, early access. Everything can change. It often does. Game development is bonkers. It's amazing what can happen in a single month of development when everyone's slaving over a computer, sweating and having mental breakdowns. So who knows what's going to happen with this? As you probably gauged from this sort of first impressions video, I've not gone over every aspect of the game. I'm going to do some other videos on ACC talking about different components. But this was sort of just the first impressions of the main things that stuck out to me. It probably worked out, but in my mind, my hype train has been fully derailed. It's gone. The steam engine has exploded, which is very, very upsetting as an Assetto Corsa fanboy. Mind you, that might be good news to people that hate my opinion. You'll probably all be like, this is the best thing ever. So who knows? One person's misery is another person's birthday party. I would say, I mean, look, comparing this to when the Assetto Corsa, when they did their early access, that to me was like, immediately playing that, I was like, this is a step above everything that I'd played before. It was just really fantastic force feedback, the graphics were sharp, the track was nice, it worked well, it loaded quickly, all that stuff. It was just so good. And the only thing I didn't like about the Assetto Corsa early access was just the lack of, the track was a small circuit we didn't really know, and the car was a rather low powered car that after spending hours driving it made me want to drive the car into my forehead. That was the only negative with that. The rest of the AC early access was just really, it just piqued my interest for more. The early access in this has just made me a little bit concerned that maybe it won't change that much. Ah, dear, because I just want, I mean, the ranking side of this potential will be amazing, and you can see the foundation of some of the systems in there in this early access thing, the encouragement going through the lap and it telling you to push in the sectors. Obviously the UI is still in development and everything, so I've not really talked about that much because it's very clearly not the final UI aspects of it. But, there's some really interesting stuff in there that, combined with something like Assetto Corsa, would be absolutely amazing. Also, combined with the underlying depth of the tire model in this seems really interesting. It's just, the bits that I've talked about. So we're going to have more videos on it, talking about some certain specific parts of the game, the night and the day and some of the options. I'll go through the graphics settings, the usual stuff that we cover on this. But, well, let's see. Early access, guys. Maybe I probably just hyped it too much in my head. But this is certainly very different from Assetto Corsa and other simulators out there. So we'll see how it goes over time. I really appreciate everyone watching this. I appreciate 505 reaching out to me and giving me a key early, so it's allowed me to get content up and ready in time for the launch. Really appreciate that. They probably regret it now. This Game of Muscle chap's an AC fanboy. He's sure to say positive things. Well, as I say, let's see how it goes. I would, because of the structure of this, I would still recommend picking it up. I mean, if you're a sim fan, I wouldn't pick it up if you're sort of a casual on the fence type person for sims. I'd just get something like AC in the sales and the other sims in the sales and what have you, just because they're finished games. If you're a fan of simulators, then I'd buy this in the early access and go along for the wild ride, because at the launch price, $24.99, that actually includes the final game. It makes sense to buy it now, because chances are you're going to want to earn it. The final price of the game is $44.99, so that's a massive incentive to buy it early. I was going to buy it. If I hadn't been given a key, I was going to buy it. So if you know that you're weird like me, then there you go. Don't make your decisions based off what I say. That's what. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? That'd be stupid. Right. There we go, guys. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed this. This was very much a honest opinion of the early access first launch version of Assetto Corsa Competizione. Look out for other videos. Until the next one, I'm off for a big cup of tea and a biscuit. Take care. Goodbye.